You're about to listen to a podcast from the Firearms Radio Network. For more, visit firearmsradio.net.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again to This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grips, MAF Corporation, and FFL Payments. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew Larosiere, and I'm joined by Mr. Ivan. What are you doing?
I'm dressing up as somebody who collects Colts. It's not a weirdo. Just a regular Colt collecting type of guy.
Just hanging out at the Bluebell.
Yeah, collecting the good ones.
that's I think that's great, and I love that for you. We got a lot to cover this week, and we're not on time, but we're more on time than usual. So we expect a lot of praise to be heaped onto us.
Yes, thank us for it being this bi-weekly in Guns.
Yeah. Is it? Oh, whatever. I don't know. The big thing everyone's been talking about is Chevron, right?
Yep.
Everyone's like, the Chevron, it's down, and it's gonna kill ATF, the Bureau.
Yeah, they're rolling over. Just and the burning question: does this mean super safety's legal?
Yes. Ivan, what is your opinion on the super safety? What is your opinion on the super safety?
I think the super safety is a very novel design. And
what is your opinion on the super? Is this make super safe legal?
Is super safe legal?
Is this make super safe
legal?
Okay, but no. Now, Rahimi, does this make super safe legal? Does that make
super safe legal?
Yeah, like that's been. I don't know why. That's been like the question that we both get constantly.
I think it's because we're in that corner of understands what the mystical lizard words mean, but then also knows what the super safety is. Because like if you ask like Mark Smith what if the super safety is legal, he'll say he doesn't say yes or no about certain products because that might be favoritism or some other horrible, awful answer like that.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, this one. So guys, Chevron is horrible, right? And it's awesome that Chevron is kill. And there's no doubt about it. This isn't another walk back, right? Like we had an EPA case earlier this year. We had like quite a few other cases that were walkbacks. But this is or was that last year? I don't remember. Point being, the court no nonsense straight said, well, first of all, they called Chevron a decaying husk with bold pretensions, and then in no uncertain terms overturned it. So that was good. The thing is that like everyone's freaking out about it, and there's a lot of like there's going to be a big impact that this is going to play going down the line. Like here, let's look at how Forbes deals with it. Supreme Court strips power from federal agencies, overturning decades-old precedent, from Allison Durkee. Supreme Court overturned a landmark ruling Friday that gave widespread power to federal agencies, a seismic ruling that has the power to upend how the federal government operates and delivers a win to conservative groups who long wanted to see the precedent overturned.
I guess the word, the things that Chevron was first used to do was things that conservative donors weren't happy with, because it was essentially a lot of like, hey, various corporations that are dumping shit into the groundwater, maybe don't do that. Yeah. And these corporations are like, we're gonna make all of our donors go against the government, and they had very little success doing that. And that it really fermented for a good 20, 30 years until the point that the government was thrown a bone by federal government, executive agencies were thrown a bone by Congress,
right,
with the Administrative Procedures Act. And in a world where the government is made up of functional, normal, good human beings, that would have been okay, and it really would have solved a lot of problems. Right? It would have streamlined the fact that Congress does get aimlessly log jammed. And this way they can kick the can to a bunch of people who maybe know more about issues than Congress, and they can keep things moving and up to date. The problem is the government is run by politicians, not good people. And so you end up giving them an inch, and then 20, 30 years later, they've taken more than a mile. They've taken the entire means of measuring something. And so now it's become illegal to measure something, so you can't even take gauges at how far they've actually ran with that 1 inch. So
let me just correct you on one thing: is that the APA was not a bone to be thrown to agencies. The APA was expressly, even way back then, to combat the evil of administrative agencies doing too much.
Right.
So the APA was actually designed to tie the hands of administrative agencies and force them to do a little less. And so it was decades after the APA, the Supreme Court is dealing with various courts are dealing with all these different cases, and a lot of them, involving the EPA and interpretations of the Clean Air Act and stuff like that. And the court kind of goes, I don't want to do this anymore. Why don't you just look? The statute is bad. It's poorly written. These people probably know because they're nerds, right? And so that was the bone that was thrown to the administrative agencies. And then for 40 years, the situation under Chevron was, if the statute is vague and the government, right, the administrative agency itself has a permissible reading, so it had to be, grounded in the statute at least somewhat. It has to be a rational reading. Even if the judge would have come to a different reading, they have to cede to that reading.
Right.
And so
it's reasonable.
So it was just permissible, right? Not even reasonable. Right. So this, of course, went completely out of control, and made, since Chevron's decision, the largest spread in government and the largest driver of compliance cost for companies has been compliance with administrative actions. So it was huge. But here's the thing. For guns specifically, we're really not going to feel this, at least not in the short term. And it's for two main reasons. Number one is the threshold question of the APA, right? Let me take a step back. Number one is that most gun laws involve criminal consequences, right? And so then that relates to number two, the threshold question in using Chevron. So in a Chevron analysis is, was the law vague? You only get Chevron deference if the law was vague. And so you might be thinking, well, we've got tons of vague laws, right? And they're all poorly written, this and that. So if you're the government and you're fighting one of these cases and you want to get to Chevron deference, prior to all this, you would have to admit that the law was vague. Unless you're doing a fallback argument. And then what happens if you admit the law is vague? Well, in criminal statutes, there's long before the APA ever existed, there's the concept of the rule of lenity, which is that when something is made illegal, when people are to be sent to prison for something, the law must state it clearly. So if the government were to try to get to Chevron in a gun case, they would be shooting themselves in the foot. And they've recognized this for a long time, right? And most of the time that Chevron's been applied in gun cases, it was while the government was kicking and screaming, saying, no, don't, right? Just let us fight over statutory interpretation. Like the government was kicking and screaming for this because they knew it meant they would lose eventually.
Right.
And on top of that, the Supreme Court hasn't granted Chevron deference since 2016, right? So the concept was mostly dead. And I did a piece on this at the Reload about my my full analysis of the situation. And I think if there's two ways that this will have an impact on gun litigation. I think number one, and frankly, more importantly, this will begin to reverse the kind of pernicious, pervasive deference, like sub-deference that courts have been giving to administrative interpretations for years now. And what do I mean by that, right? Even if they're not applying Chevron deference, right? Even if they're saying, okay, well, we're not applying Chevron deference, I'm just agreeing with the government. It's impossible for that not to be in the back of the judge's mind, like, oh, well, you know, they're the experts and they know, like, you know, the same thing. If it's not codified, not codified, right? But if it's not legally enshrined as a specific type of reliance, it's just as dangerous if it is just a pervasive thought among judges who want to get out of having to do hard legal analysis. And Chevron has kind of stood for this big proposition that that's an appropriate thought to have. So what Loper does, that this case, what Loper does is says straight clearly to judges, your job, regardless of what the job of the science people is, your job is to read the law and determine what the law actually says. And you never get to cede that to somebody else. And so, yeah, I put this in the Reload article. While nerdy lobster-clawed science types at the EPA might have nuanced understandings when it comes to sniffing nitrogen, that doesn't change the fact that laws have to be consistently interpreted. And even if it's nitrogen sniffers that really like do the nitrogen sniffing, at the end of the day, it's Congress critters that write the law and they're lawyers, right? So it is within the purview, and it is frankly within the core concept of separation of powers to have the judiciary be the only ones who are interpreting the law. So it's very good for the state of the law overall, but we're going to see impacts of this broadly way down the line, except in one area. There's one area of gun laws that is devoid of criminal consequences, right? And is based entirely on a permissive regime that I think can really come out after this. And that's importation.
Yeah.
Especially the sporting purposes test. I think that is in big trouble. What do you think?
I tend to concur. I know a lot of people were like, jumping up and down, like, "Oh, this means the pistol brace thing is dead letter." It's not true. ATF isn't relying on Chevron at all in there, and in fact, they're trying to keep Chevron away with a 20-foot pole. They don't want that and didn't want that from the beginning. You could say maybe that was them reading the tea leaves, but more really, they realize that it's just not a sound legal argument for most of the gun things. There are some cases
of the criminal implication, like 100%.
Right. There are some cases recently where the ATF has leaned on Chevron to do anti-gun stuff, such as using a non-incorporated trust to try and form a machine gun, because technically speaking, unincorporated trusts aren't listed on the parties that are prohibited from possessing a machine gun. And at the time that the Hughes Amendment was written, I don't think trust NFA ownership was like a well fleshed out discovered thing, which is why they wouldn't have mentioned it. Right. But now that you've got sort of this new legal entity that is capable of owning NFA firearms and everybody agrees that's the case, they're not listed as being prohibited from owning machine guns, new machine guns. Right. And ATF has used Chevron in the past to say, no. We say an unincorporated trust is just like being any of these other things. And so, you can't have them. And so little quiche niche stuff, ATF has relied on Chevron in the past, but I think your analysis is correct. Where I think where this has the most impact is 5-10 years from now, once courts have finally gotten bold enough to say, hey, executive agencies, you're wrong. Once they stop getting, it's not even Chevron deference. It's just like deferring to them because they're quote unquote the experts. Right. Lots of places in court will hopefully start requiring the ATF to prove some of this nonsense. So instead of the ATF saying that's a machine gun because we said so, or that's a short barreled rifle because we said so, and stomping their feet about it, the courts will be, did you through the APA say officially that this was a machine gun or a short-barreled rifle, and the ATF will go, well, no.
So it's or explain in concrete detail how the statute matches the thing in front of you.
And even with the pistol brace rule, right, there's things that the ATF would say is a short-barreled rifle. Like, assume the pistol brace rule isn't enjoined and tortured to death a million times over. Say it actually went into effect and didn't get enjoined. There are things that could be designed, could be manufactured and sold that technically don't fall within the purview of the pistol brace rule, right? Like you use the old score sheet and come up with some use of a pistol brace on something that eventually somehow isn't an SBR. ATF could still come after you and say, "Oh, we think that's an SBR," and they'd railroad you through court. You'd be out a lot of money, out potentially your own liberty, right? Thrown in jail over it. And previously,
under indictment, lose your ability to have your job, your security clearance, or whatever it is you had. I mean, not that people who have jobs requiring security clearances are people. I'm not suggesting that, but
and so previously the sort of deference that especially the trial court gives to the ATF is if the ATF says it, they're the gun experts. They know everything, and your Second Amendment challenge will be denied. Any sort of technical analysis will be denied, and maybe you'll be able to take it up on appeal. And in some cases, trial court judges will even say, like, "Oh, I understand you're keeping that for appeal," which is insane because, like, you are supposed to be doing the analysis. It's your job.
Yeah, what if you did your job?
Hopefully, this decision sort of reminds judges there was at least a little bit of wink, wink, nudge, nudging, saying like, "Hey, this is your job. It's not the agency's job to tell the court the way it is." And the court goes, yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, There's supposed to be some amount of analysis and reasoning that goes on there that isn't just take the whole government's boot straight down your throat and become the government's meat puppet.
Yeah. This was actually something I grappled with in the Hoover case, with the trial judge. Where because I had explained something in the context of Chevron, because the only evidence the government had for its interpretation was, an agency opinion, right?
Right. Them making it up. And I believe at the time that anybody was arrested for it, they hadn't published the fact that they thought this was a machine gun yet. They just come out of nowhere and say, "We think it is."
Yeah. And so I explained, I was like, because there was like 3 different motions where I was like, "Judge, you need to apply the statutory definition. Like you can't just cite their effectively the testimony of counsel, right? The unsworn, unproven statements of counsel." And I talked about it in the context of Chevron, right? Where I'm like, this isn't a situation where you can just defer to the agency. And then they laughed at me. They're like, "Why are you bringing up Chevron? This isn't a Chevron case." I'm like, because you're deferring to an agency in an inappropriate situation. And that but that's one of those situations I'm talking about, right? They can't even recognize that they are all of this shit. All of these situations where they the trial courts allow the ATF to do these horrible things, it boils down to a Chevron virus where they just the courts automatically stamp. Yeah, they just automatically stamp. Well, they said they're the guys who know, and they said it. So why would I read the statute critically?
They're saying it now for the first time in court. Is evidence that everyone should have known it was that way forever, which is kind of a bonkers way of looking at it, because there's any number of ways that they could screw over any number of people by doing that. And I don't know that this decision necessarily stops that from happening, but it should stop it from getting worse. And assuming the courts have the balls to do their job, from there, the ball starts, the pendulum has swung as far as it's going to swing to one side, and hopefully it comes crashing back towards the other at rapid speed.
At funny speed. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, guys, if you want to support Matt Hoover, send money to his wife. She really needs it right now. Things are not going amazing for them for obvious reasons. Nothing to do with the case, We're in the Court of Appeals now. It takes a long time, but it's fully briefed, except for a couple more little things we're going to do. But check out his channel. His wife has posted links to her Cash App and the Only Tactical Fan store. I really would appreciate if you guys supported them. Through all of the stuff that happened with that case, no gun rights groups stepped in to provide aid. Okay. There was one group who stepped in to make a mess. Another group who stepped in at the last second without, I'm not even going to get in on that, but that wasn't super helpful. Both of those groups fundraised a lot of money off of doing those actions. Neither of them sent any money to the suffering family of the victim of state action here. So I really, if you guys want to support something that's like a core microcosm of everything that's going wrong with our government in the gun space, right? In the administrative overreach space, in the failure of the rule of law space, please send some money to Matt Hoover's wife. Sincerely. All right, so we're gonna do a hard shift. We're gonna put the clutch in and so now we're going to talk about the debate.
Yes.
So let me say something. This is not a red team go channel.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a blue shoot channel, right? But and so I know we have some supporters and some watchers and some subscribers that are super and the actual ideologically interesting side of communists, not just tanky idiots. And so I don't want to frustrate them too much by talking about the debate. But guys, here's the thing: our role, or long ago, I decided my role in this society is, if I'm going to survive and not perish under the horrible pressure of just how terrible everything is, I'm going to take the role of the jester, where when the emperor comes out and he's not wearing any clothes, and everyone else is looking away, I'm going to go, ha ha, that's his cock, right? And point. And that's what I think needs to be done. So you can feel free to skip this if you think it's me being a Trumpist or whatever. Because frankly, they both sounded stupid as hell, but only one of them was completely
hard to watch. Stupid as hell.
Oh my God, I'm sure you guys have seen it, but I'm not going to play anything. I don't want to get copyrighted or whatever, but you guys saw I'm going to pull up some quotes from Biden.
Right. Anybody who's sort of familiar with what it's like for people to get older, right? And they start to lose parts of their brain. I mean, he's showing signs of past early onset dementia, right? And that is what it is. It's a part of being old, right? But there's a certain cruelty that I think comes into play whenever, right, the guy's living out what's going to be his last years before he completely loses his mind and he starts to forget who he is, which is a horrible thing. And he shouldn't be spending that time doing this. It's tragic that he's in that situation. And there's potential that enough of his mind's gone that he's not really even sure what he's doing anymore at this point, that he's totally embodied the spiders inside of a skin suit. The spiders have autonomy at this point, complete autonomy. And it's a tragic thing. And it was difficult for me to watch, right? Because I've known people that have gotten old to that point that they sort of lose their wherewithal. And it's not a sort of thing I would want to broadcast to as many people as possible, because some rate it's humiliating, right? If you ask me, it's worse than having somebody have to wipe your ass because you can't use your arm so good anymore. It's like you don't even have your mind anymore. The one thing that ought to be yours entirely. So that's tough.
Well,
Hard
and
to
we also
watch.
don't know, like, to be fair, we don't know what's going on behind the, like, you know, behind the veil. He may be fully switched on in his head. Right. That's possible. But I mean, this is the CNN transcript of what was said. So I am reading the most biased in favor of President Biden's what he said. So, and this is speaking about Trump. He had the largest national debt of any president for a year period, number one. Number two, he got $2 trillion tax cut, benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the taxes. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. I mean, billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24% or 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raised 500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out this debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, childcare, elder care, making sure that we're continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, we finally beat Medicare.
That's bad.
It's otherworldly. And so, you know what a while ago I complained, right? I complained that gone was the Obama era politics speak, where Obama could speak so eloquently.
He was an actual silver-tongued politician. He was that incarnate.
He would speak so beautifully for 5 minutes and not say a damn word, right? Whereas Biden,
he's got all the words, and they're in a race to get out.
Words, and he's just spraying them, right? Like, it was hilarious.
His mind is just a bump stock for words.
And so the best part is, like, number one, very obviously, the situation is hilarious because the DNC can't drop him because of, like, the way their rules is. He would need to consent and, like, be on board with it. And whatever's going on with the 12,000 spiders that are occupying his corpse, they are not on board with not running for president. And, like,
I know they've held, the news since then, because, like, even people on his team were saying, like, yeah, we got to find somebody else, which is not reassuring. Like, CNN's post-debate analysis was like, bro, what the fuck? We're going to lose this election. We Democrats are going to lose this election. It was like a lot of negative analysis. And then supposedly since then, people on Biden's staff have been talking about what's happening behind closed doors, including, Biden and his team met with all of their biggest donors to say, like, hey, there's a possibility maybe he will have to step down. And then other meetings with donors, supposedly they've said absolutely no chance. He's definitely not stepping down. He's the only reason that he was stumbling is because he had a cold. And then they blamed like 6 or 7 different people who were all like related to the debates, like other people on Biden's team. Like, it's everybody's fault possible, except for the fact that maybe he's getting old and his mind's not all there.
Right.
And everybody, and then then supposedly the donors spoke up and said, like, it's very offensive that you're talking to us like this. We're not stupid. Our eyes saw what we saw. Like, maybe we should be looking at a different candidate. So complete disarray is what it seems like the situation is there over at the DNC. They did a poll of DNC members or whatever, right? Like DNC registered voters. And the poll showed, they polled what it would be like Biden versus Trump, and then like 5 other up and comings, and like Kamala and Gavin Newsom and JB Pritzker. Sort of like what if we ran these guys instead? And what they were trying to show was that Biden is ahead of all of them with 44% of the vote. When you ask Democrats, Who's going to win? 44% of them say Biden, which means the majority say Trump, which isn't
So
like your own polling shows your best guy losing. It's not a great situation.
Yeah, I like this quote from Hank Scheinkopf, campaign aide to former Bill Clinton and longtime political strategist, which is not a real thing, by the way. Whenever I used to go on TV in DC and I said something that sounded vaguely right wing, they would call me a Republican political strategist. The worst, which I'm not any of those things, the worst moment for Biden was him constantly looking to the side of the stage. It looked like he didn't know where he was, or like Flash Gordon hit him with a ray gun.
And I saw, I saw a bunch of like there's QAnon, right? But then there's also Blue Anon, which is like the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
And so I saw a bunch of people who were Blue Anon posting saying that CNN intentionally rigged this debate to make Biden look bad. And that's why they were constantly filming, him in profile, right? They're always trying to film the side of his face. And it's like, dog, the guy just can't look at the camera. He's looking everywhere but the camera. Like he's looking over at Trump half the time. He's just looking like there wasn't an audience, right? So there's no audience for him to be looking at. He's just like looking off to the left and looking off to the right. Because I mean, his mind's wandering. He's like he's tapped out. He's like, this whole thing's fucking stupid. I'm thinking about that chocolate chip.
Chocolate. So this is the election betting odds, which is has not been as accurate as it used to be, right? Because our country has jumped the shark, and there's also bizarre interference with betting markets. But anyway, so in the last day we have up 2.3% for Trump. Let's see the last week what that looked like. Oh, really? Not that much of a difference.
Ouch. Down 16% though. That's the number there.
That's brutal. That's gnarly.
Oh yeah,
God, he gave 16% to everyone,
right?
including Kennedy and Clinton.
People have been talking about Michelle Obama running. That's about
honestly that wouldn't be a bad strategy. I feel like. I don't know. That's about as good of a speaking as a political strategist.
Right on the order of bad decisions, it's not the worst bad decision.
It's like running somebody whose last name is Kennedy. Everyone's like, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fine. It's better than this, whatever it is.
Whatever the hell's going on now.
Yeah. One thing I'm really looking forward to doing though. At the end of Biden's presidency, right? Because the last three administrations have been like a bizarre turn of events for gun owners. I think there's a way that we can quantify the impact that the administrative agencies and the executive directly had on gun owners. And I'm very worried for what that will look like.
Right.
Because do you know where I'm going with that?
I don't know.
We never would have noticed it at the time. But I think Obama may have been on net liberalizing for gun owners.
I think it's close to a wash. My suspicion is it's pretty close to a wash.
So listen, here's the thing, and this couldn't have been foreseen at the time, but the elimination of the law enforcement sign-off requirement is the reason suppressors and SBRs are everywhere now. Like, yes,
but then in hand with that, he also did the whole suppressor parts are suppressors on their own thing. Which,
that was fine.
Was that an APA thing, or did they just decide one day that was the way it was?
There was later a rulemaking, but I think that they just kind of started saying it one time, and there's a lot of funny stories about when that started happening.
Yeah.
But then we've also got is interesting choice to eliminate carry bans on federal property,
right?
Which is
but then there was the M855.
Yeah, and the 545 one.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think it was a wash, but
Okay, yeah, no, it was probably not liberalizing. It was
Right.
probably not. I think it's just that the past two administrations have been so fucking awful that
the inmate 55 ban was probably as close as Obama came to weaponizing ATF against us, except he didn't go through with it, right? He gave up, right? He caved the pressure and was like, actually, this isn't a great idea, and then it didn't happen. There was
545 thing was that was more of a Clinton thing,
right, and that was an import side thing,
which I hate.
Right, it was sort of a different mechanism that they pulled the levers on there.
Yeah,
but I think by the time you get to Trump is the first time you see like, and you can say bump stocks are stupid gimmick, blah blah blah. That was a massive weaponization of the ATF to take something that plain old wasn't and say it was.
It was a hard lever pull, and I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, right, going forward, because I've talked to some people who are lizard wranglers, who are like lizard sayers, and they're like, oh well, we want to make sure we do it good this time. I don't know, we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be when it happens, not if. But anyway,
I guess one last note on that is the thing that really makes me interested, right? Like, how we'll be able to tell early, right? Like if it's a Trump election victory,
right?
If he gets Dettelbach out of office in the first 90 days, I think that's a really good sign for us. Not that everything Dettelbach has done has been bad, but he has justified a lot of the bad that they have done.
And he is fat.
Yes. I think that
legally,
if you can replace him with somebody who is as proactively bad as he and or Merrick Garland have been with these rules they've pushed, you need somebody that's that proactive in the other direction, where they sit down and they say, I'm the director of the ATF. What my job whenever they go in front of Congress and they justify their job, the way they're going to do that is, this is how I'm trying to get rid of regulations that infringe on people's rights. Like, acknowledge the fact they exist and see which ones you can actually effectuate, right? Which ones you can just get rid of. Because there's a lot of them that's just stuff the ATF's just made up out of nowhere. It's like not real.
The sporting purposes thing. Like, guys, the reason that the gun market in the United States sucks ass was made up.
Yep.
Like, and it could be fixed by the executive. And I mean, that, that's a horrible miscarriage of justice. That's how it's came, and that's the only way to fix it, right? But or the most expedient way to fix it. I'm gonna try to fix it the other way, because I think we can do a funny lawsuit, and we're strategy braining that in the Discord. We're figuring out how we're gonna do that, and it's gonna be funny. But anyway, I think it's time to advance.
Yes.
Not you. And what is more advanced than VZGrips.com? Guys, new chisel RMR covers. You go to VZGrips.com. They have grip modules. They make your gun feel good. They make it work better. It's just true. The gun hits harder with VZ Grips. It's always been true. Guys, what are you a nice Reddit guy? Do you have a heck of a suit? Here, let's check for you. CZ75 right away. Look at all of these different options of CZ75 grip available in any color that you think about the grip, whatever it is, and you can use it, and they are good. So buy at least 3, test them out, give the ones that you like the least to the friends that you like the least. That's how it should work. And guys, if you use promotional code THISWEEK15, that's THISWEEK15, you are going to get 15% off your order, and that is the thickest, juiciest discount that is available from VZGrips.com. So guys, VZGrips.com, promotional code THISWEEK15. Check them out.
Matthias carries a CZ75 with VZ Grips.
Yep, and I have VZ Grips on my 40 caliber high power.
I just got some VZ Grips, my second set of VZ Grips for a 1911. The first set didn't fit because I got the complete wrong grips, and so now I've just decided one day I will have a short grip 1911 that I'll put them on.
Oh, yeah. Can those little double stack ones, would that work with that? the short double stackers, the hog.
Yeah, except they're already wide grip, so that gun's just going to be goofy looking at that point. But yeah, I need to get myself a slim hog, but then make it fat, make it the fat hog.
Oh, okay. So this is interesting. What is it? Yeah. So next up, we're going to talk about Rahimi. And the thing is, we did a live stream on the Fudbusters channel going over Rahimi, analyzing it and everything like that. There was a lot of chicken littling happen. A lot of the sky's falling. We're all effed. Everything it's going to go
Super
so bad.
safeties are illegal.
What do they do with the super safety? I hate them. But anyway, Rahimi is a weird case. And I guess since we haven't talked about it on the show, we got to do it today. The question, is it Jover, right? Is Bruin kill because of Rahimi? And we got the Hill, an article on the Hill from, on the missed opportunity on the Second Amendment here. Supreme Court recently issued a much-awaited opinion upholding a federal law that prohibits individuals subject to domestic violence restraining orders from possessing firearms. On paper, it was a win for gun control. In reality, it was a missed opportunity. Facts of the case were alarming, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we all know about how effed up it is. Predictably, this ruling set the lower courts on fire. Struggles over what constitutes an analog, how far back one must look to find history, and what to do when the test offered observed results festered across the country. Rahimi's case offers a striking example. This is actually really true. When the Supreme Court took the case, the consensus among experts was that they would uphold the law. And on June 21st, the court issued an 8-1 opinion that proved those experts right. John Roberts wrote for the court, holding that the Bruin test should not be construed so narrowly, and that here, the principle underlying several historical laws, that it is permissible to disarm dangerous people, is sufficiently similar to a law disarming those subject to domestic violence restraining orders. But then he stopped. After clarifying that the specific law at issue in this case was constitutional based on a specific set of historical laws, the court failed to offer any real guidance going forward. Ketanji Brown Jackson decried this concern in her concurring opinion, stating that lower courts are struggling. In my view, blame may lie with us, not them. I don't know. I think this guy's kind of spot on.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no. Third-year law student at Duke University School of Law with a focus on Second Amendment law. No, this guy's a dipshit. I want nothing to do with him. But it's interesting.
I think our predictions were right. I think our predictions had been that the law will be upheld. They'll say that he's dangerous person, blah, blah, blah.
I said it would be a narrow, this ticket is for this train only. And it was a little wider than that.
Right. They probably expanded the scope of Bruin beyond what would be most favorable to the questions asked in hardware bans. That said, I don't think they do this with abandon. I think the court is probably anxious to get a hardware ban case in front of it.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Rahimi was a situation where the why was identical.
Right.
The historical laws were addressing the exact same societal problem. Not in even remotely the same way, but addressing the same societal problem. Disarmament of dangerous people, right? We can quibble on what that means, but remember, in Rahimi's particular case, he did agree that he was dangerous.
Yes.
Right. And the court didn't give carte blanche for many things, which is why the Justice Department was like, court, you got to tell us what you meant by that, which they'll totally do, right? They'll totally just give a guidance of it. Yeah, right.
Right. They'll give you an answer instead of platitudes and ponderings.
Right. So we were right in our predictions. The problem is, in hardware bans, there is no historical analog with the same why at all. The historical, and we know what historical analogs there are, because why? dipshit Duke University Law Center retard school for gun idiots, whose sole purpose, by the way, is to make up dog shit to be used in Bruin analyses, by the way. Like all of the research that comes out of the Duke University Second Amendment Law Center, like that they produce,
it's anti-gun propaganda in the form of stuff they can make admissible.
Exactly. Yes, it's partisan dog shit. And actually, like, one of the first things they did was come up with, this is our database of historical gun laws. And my first assignment, because you guys, I work with Maryland Shall Issue, which is a very important group. My first assignment with MSI was one of the first times where the state just copy pasted this historical analog list. And guess what I found when I started like digging and like finding original documents and stuff? They lied.
They took things like wildly out of context or omitted context on purpose, or there was no context and they're just like almost inventing quotes.
Right. And so like super messed up. That said, we know what the historical laws are because they've cataloged all of them. And there are historical laws affecting hardware. I also know this because I've litigated in court against these examples that were brought up to justify a Second Amendment analog. And the how, some of it was similar. They would check, make sure you had the gun right, make sure the gun was a certain caliber, certain length in some instances. The why, though, was a little different. The why of the current law is because we're scared of these guns. The why of the historical laws was we need to make sure you have a gun and that it is sufficiently dangerous. So I don't think that this rubber stamps, like logically, it doesn't rubber stamp hardware bans at all. There are other things that it may cause problems for that are bad, right? But hardware is probably the thing that we're most concerned about because that's what affects, well, two things, right? Prohibition, because there's far too many, frankly, I'm just going to say it straight up. There's far too many states that regulate and like put predicates on you simply owning and possessing firearms. And number two, like most people in federal prison are there because they had a gun, just because they peaceably possessed a firearm while being subject to some 922G disqualifier. And, guys, I'm going to get a little bit on the racial justice thing here, but this progressive government thinks that it's so like, all this whole like, oh, you're not, if you don't vote for Biden, you're not black, like, right? And like people actually believe that. Like I was watching a service at a Black Baptist church, and like half of the sermon was about how you still have to vote for Biden, despite what happened at the debate. Which I was just like, where am I? Like, let's look at how this stuff stacks up. The feds invent crack, pump it into the ghettos, where state and local governments, they're all the same motherfuckers, right? Work together to lock minority people. Why? So that they don't compete with white businesses. They pump these drugs in there for God knows why. And so what do? Well, the same thing the Chinese did when they pumped the opium in it. They start doing it, right? And dealing in it. And so, they're dealing it because you've been providing it to them. So you stop and frisk them and you like search them down and you get them for some stupid possession charge. And now you're a felon. And then you stop and frisk them again. And, oh, you live in a bad neighborhood that we locked you in? That's so funny. You get to go to jail again. That is like, guys, that is the most common reason somebody is sitting in federal prison right now. That series of events. That's horrible. We fix that. We reduce like the inmate population by half or more I know I'm going to get some commenters that are, we've got like some weird people who have weird race ideas, and they'll take exception to that somehow. But I think the federal government, in any one of its different avenues, losing half of its business is a pretty fucking good step. Right?
Half of their business, half their customers.
Right? And of course, right, it's private, this and that, right? I don't know, again, but I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I think that's pretty much spot on. I mean, I think the court is angling to take a hardware ban case at some point. It's currently got all of the Illinois' ones in front of it right now on an injunction question. I don't think they're going to take them. I strongly doubt they're going to take them. It's going to be a question of, do they just deny cert or do they GVR it in light of Rahimi? If they GVR it in light of Rahimi, it's going to go back to the seventh. It's going to go back to the Seventh Circuit, and the instruction is going to be actually a looser fit on your analogs is okay, where their analogs are already like, to the extent they used them, non-existent, because they didn't actually get to the Bruin analysis because they were just like, oh, they're not arms. So I don't know that there's a lot of GVRable stuff there in the first place, but I'm confident the court is angling to take a hardware ban case at some point. They're just going to be right because they had the opportunity to take carry ban cases before New York versus Bruin, right? Mm-hmm. Except they sat and waited until they had their Goldilocks one, because that's, I guess if you're this court and you're in this position the way it is, right, with this sort of 6-3 split that's going on, there's no need to rush because none of them are in bad enough health that it's like, yeah, we need to like jam one through real quick. And I guess that's just sort of the gamesmanship of the court, right? Is that it's inherently very, very political for the whole liberty being blindfolded and holding the scale thing. It's actually like they've got night vision goggles and they see in the dark and they're always thinking they're wired on Adderall. They're not going to sleep. they're plans within plans sort of thing going on there. Yeah. So 100%. We'll have to see. But I do agree that sort of the two worst things we've got going on probably are hardware bans and then your 922G non-violent things where it's you had the bad plant and a gun and you go to jail because you had the gun.
Right. Or no, you had the bad plant 10 years ago.
Right. Right. You don't even have to have the bad plant with you still.
Right. That's what happened to one of my friends. He's like really, really good guy, really amazing guy. In the 90s, he had a bad plant conviction, and now I'm representing him in trying to get his rights back. So it's awful. It's awful. But Rahimi didn't foreclose any of that.
Yes.
And if you actually follow the logic of it, it almost like blows the door open to it. Because it's like, look at the check marks you used in Rahimi.
It completely leaves the door open to a mirror image of Rahimi, where it's instead of it being a admittedly dangerous, violent guy, there's a whole plethora of people that 922 prevents from being able to possess a firearm that are non-violent and non-dangerous.
Yep. All right, next up, guys. This is big. The bump stock ban has been blocked. Again, I'm not talking about the Supreme Court. Schumer came up and was like, guys, come on, we really got to ban them. They ignored him.
Yeah, they tried to do a unanimous consent thing, which for the uninitiated is like not the whole Senate isn't even in session. They just have a couple of lizards show up to be like, unless anybody says no, we're going to say that actually we've all agreed to this and it's passed. Just I mean, it's stupid, right? Like if you listen to the unanimous consent sessions, especially at the end of a congressional season or whatever, like everybody who just like has their own little pet bill will throw it out there, like the bizarre ones,
just to see if no one's watching.
Like the ban zombie guns one will be brought up at some point. Like all of this like ridiculous stuff where they have to like be able to show their constituents, oh, we tried, but the other side
and the Republicans blocked it.
They blocked it. And so, the way unanimous consent goes is like, this is why we think this should pass. And everybody should agree it passes unless anybody says no. And then somebody from the other side immediately says, no, it's fucking stupid. Why don't you shut the fuck up, you dumb idiot? And then, then they sit down, and then they the side that proposed it gets a time to rebut, and he's like, "You heartless! You want children to die in a notable Las Vegas." And then they sit down, and then there's some headlines, and you can go to your donors and be like, "Well, I did a good job."
Even look at how seriously he's taking it with his polo shirt and saggy breasts. Like, guys, look, you gotta do it. You gotta brand them. Oh God. Anyway, so yeah, that's important. You know what else is? Holy crap! This tab is using 2 gigs. Let's close that out and get to FFLPaymentProcessing.com. Guys, FFLPaymentProcessing.com is a community of firearms enthusiasts delivering unrivaled payment processing solutions for the firearm industry. Having personally experienced issues with high rates, high-risk merchant classification, sudden service termination, and hidden costs, we founded FFL Payments to create a transparent, fair, and reliable alternative. Even if you're outside of the firearms industry, check them out. You will probably save some money. And also, guys, if you mention FUD Busters when you're talking to FFL Payment Processing, you will get a free terminal, and that is a huge, 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 huge value. You already know it. So, guys, check out FFL Payment Processing. I personally vouch for this company. You know why? Because I'm involved in it. And so that's how I know that they are not going to back out of your business just because you are a little gun curious. Because guess what? You're not as gunny as me. I'm a gunnier guy than you, and I use FFL Payment Processing in my businesses. So FFLPaymentProcessing.com. Be sure to mention FUDbusters to get yourself a free terminal. Oh God, this next is fucking... I heard we're not supposed to say the F word on YouTube no more.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. Who was it that Mr. What's his name got a demon?
Count Dankula had a video demonetized, and he has a YouTube rep because he's a big guy.
Yeah, big guy.
And they told him it's because he said the word F ** KING.
It's a big one.
It's not, you're not supposed to say that or something or whatever. Like, it's interesting to watch the puritanification of YouTube happen and fast forward.
Right.
Where, like, you know, at the beginning of the platform, there was like live leak sort of stuff was just fine. You could go and it was monetizable. Yeah. Once YouTube added monetization, it was fine. You could have whatever you wanted. And that just like incrementally, YouTube was like, well, you can't do this because it's too edgy, and you can't do that because it's too edgy. And initially they were like pushing the Overton window on what edginess was allowed, where like a whole lot of like, you know, more traditionally left-wing or progressive edginess was totally fine. And it was just right-wing progressive edginess that you couldn't have. And I think it's really been since Susan Wojciechowski, Polish name, stepped down. Then this new guy's been around that they've really been like puritanificationing, made up word, on both sides of things at this point, where both the left and right sort of political touchy edgy issues are not monetizable. They don't want them on the platform. They sort of want to turn YouTube into
the TV.
Right. They really want it to become like the TV, where it's got the same sort of rules that are pushed on things in that regard.
Yeah. What happened to the Polish? They need to bring back the Bober. Bober. Next, it's terrible. Why is everything like? One of the whole reasons you would want to come on not TV is because it's not TV, and you don't like, and you know maybe the FCC can let you be, but I'm sure that what this is they get a big advertiser that's like, we got an email that our soap was being shown next to a F-bomb, and we don't get that on NBC. So, you know, and they're like trying to negotiate their rate or something. And then they're like, watch, look. I fixed it. I'm sure it's something like that, because this is very clearly like the way they're running YouTube. They're running it as if it doesn't matter what they do to us.
Right.
Like they're just assuming that there's no breaking point. There's no point in which we would switch because the cost of switching is too high. But the reality is that people haven't switched away from YouTube. probably just because it hasn't gotten bad enough. I don't know. That's what I think. And it's pretty bad, right? But obviously not bad enough to justify the switching costs for everybody. Because if it did, they're just like people switched off of MySpace when the switching costs were low enough. It can happen. It will happen at some point in the future, and I don't think they believe that will happen. And it will be a funny stock market day when it finally does. But all right, again, shifting. This is the worst type of crap. Like this,
it's awful dogma politics, just vile garbage. Is
vile nonsense, right? This is the like if you want to trigger me, just say public health, right? Because that is no other pair of words will prime me as well to know that somebody is about to say some shit they have no idea what the hell they're talking about, right? Because the conception of bringing up public health outside of the context of like pathogens and things is fundamentally retarded. So anyway, we're like the U.S. Surgeon General has released a new report and issued an advisory on the public health crisis of firearm violence in the United States. Dr. Vivek Murthy released a landmark Surgeon General's advisory on firearms violence, declaring firearms violence in America a public health crisis. Firearms violence is pervasive, with more than half of U.S. adults or their family members having experienced a firearm-related incident in their lives. What is that?
There's no way that's a real statistic.
Yeah, what is a firearm-related incident? I mean, I've shot guns. Like, is that over the last decade, the number of people who have died from firearm-related injuries, including suicides. Well, damn it, I have to. Note to self, Matt, you have to censor that. Homicides and accidental deaths has been rising, and firearms violence is now the leading cause of death among children and adolescents. And like, that is so nonsense, because then this is one of the most pervasive wrong claims that are made. And then you click on it, and what do they give you? The raw data. In order to get to that conclusion, you have to know all of the stuff to exclude, right? In order to get, it's unsupportable. It's completely nonsense. And that's why
there's an exclusion of 0 and 1 year olds and an inclusion of 18 and 19 year olds. And then there's all like the usual statistic, quote unquote, control factors where they'll take like known quantities of people where like their cause of death is undetermined, and they'll parse that out or include that in one group and not the other group. And you do all sorts of gamesmanship. To get you to the conclusion where it could be like refrigerators falling over is like in the top 3 for killers of children by using, it's the whole lies, damned lies, and then statistics.
So this is how we fixed it. According to the Surgeon General. 1, critical research investments, such as improving data sources and data collection, examining short-term and long-term outcomes of firearm violence, and conducting implementation research to improve effectiveness of prevention strategies. 2, community risk reduction and education prevention strategies, such as implementing community violence interventions, incorporating organizational violence prevention and emergency preparedness elements into safety programs, and encouraging health systems to facilitate education on safe and secure storage. Firearms risk reduction strategies, such as requiring safe and secure firearm storage, including firearm child access prevention laws, which work so good. Implementing universal background checks and expanding purchaser licensing laws. Banning assault weapons and large capacity magazines for civilian use.
That would fix it.
Yeah. Treating firearms like other consumer products, including requiring safety testing or safety features.
I don't know if you guys actually want that. Well, they want it because it would make things more expensive and cumbersome, and then they could put some executive in charge. It's like, nope, no gun safe. Sorry.
Implementing effective firearm removal policies when individuals are a danger to themselves or others, and creating safer conditions in public places related to firearm use and carry. Mental health action and support, such as increasing access to affordable, high-quality mental health care and substance use treatment. I mean, that I agree with. And B, building on investments to enhance safety measures and evidence-based violence prevention efforts in learning settings. That was almost nothing was said in this whole thing. So like here we got give me money, pass all of the laws, give me money, and hey, people should be able to go to shrinks. I don't think this is worth much analysis.
I think like shockingly absent there, right? And as it always is
right.
They're very interested in spreading education on storing guns safely, but there is no interest or emphasis on
using them.
If we're to accept that the federal government has any role in a public safety context, harping to you about the ownership and risks involved in owning guns, and then they're going to be asking for money. Some, if not most of that money should be going towards government-funded gun safety training. And it should be implemented at least in part in schools where a country that has more guns than people. It's kind of bizarre that we teach everyone, like in New York, what's the figure? It's like less than half the people in the city actually get their driver's license because none of them are going to drive. You can't even own a car. It's impossible.
Right.
It's crazy that we still then force them to learn how to drive through public school programs. Private school programs usually also required. It's crazy to me that there isn't that same thing, but for guns. And probably the reason for that is Republicans have a knee-jerk reflex to that concept because they know the sort of people who usually end up being teachers, you probably don't want to teach your children how to use guns safely. So it ends up having to be because at least the way it was at my school is like driver's ed was taught by the PE teachers. The fuck do they actually know about driving in cars, right? Nothing. They just have extra time because they're not doing PE all the time.
Right.
So you'd have to have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about to make this effective. So it becomes a little bit of a disaster. But if you're willing to breach the subject, right? You're willing to talk about guns as a public safety item. If crossing the street was a public safety item, wouldn't you tell people how to cross the street safely? If unprotected sex and STDs were a public safety health problem, wouldn't you want to teach people what is sex and how do you do it safely instead of
on a condom and things,
right?
Which they do teach in schools, right?
Instead
But
of
they're
bizarre abstinence training where it's no, don't touch it, don't go near it, it's bad. Because that's never stopped a kid from being curious, right?
They also do that. I remember I had to sign a paper in a public school to sign a paper that I would abstain.
Yeah, I won't eat the weed, heroin, sex, drugs.
Yeah, it's all stupid. So let's just move on. So this next story is really interesting. So this is an article on the Meat Eater. I have no idea if they are trustworthy or not.
They write all sorts of hunting articles. They write laws that are great to ignore about what calibers to use for hunting.
Yeah, that's really, really boring. But yeah, they've got an interesting article on how the ATF slashed Form 4 approval times, which I was looking at recently. I'm like, yeah, damn, them Johns sure is quicker. And so let's take a look. Purchasing a suppressor has historically been one of the most frustrating experiences for gun owners. The paperwork is onerous, but the wait time is what really gets you. No one wants to drop $1,000 on something just to wait a year or more to bring it home.
So I did read through this one, before we put it in the show notes, even. Okay. Sort of the gist. The two things the source for this is Silencer Central's, I think, CEO or director, whatever their corporate structure bigwig guys are. They're sort of the sources for this. And they point to two big things having changed at the ATF that allowed this to happen. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't the thing that I supposed it would have been, which is kind of interesting. The first thing that they pointed to is that Stephen Dettelbach got appointed, which you may think is strange because he's kind of an anti-gun lunatic and always has been. But Dettelbach being appointed as an actual director means that he can make actual directorial choices. Where they explained the previous acting directors didn't have that authority, and they realized if they rock the boat at all, they're probably out of a job. Right? They're probably going to have to go find something else to do. So they're just interested in maintaining course and not changing the way that anything actually works at ATF. Meanwhile, once Dettelbach is in, he's obviously very interested in changing the way that things worked. In fact, he's willing to go on the news and tell you how stupid he is about guns, admit it, and humiliate himself, and has no problem, rocking the boat to the extent of humiliating himself. But him being appointed means that you can drag him in front of Congress and bully him politically. And that had happened multiple times where every time he was dragged in front of Congress to be humiliated about something, at least one congressperson would ask him, why are NFA wait times so long? We give you so much money to make sure this is done properly. And
the committee has allocated $20 million to the e-form system. Why isn't it working? You better get it right. That's what you could.
Right. Or that $20 million, the threat there is the $20 million goes away and you lose a lot of employees and that makes you look bad. And then political pressure, the fire rises against you.
Right.
And so certainly that would have had some effect, right? Because at the end of the day, the Republicans did manage to slash ATF's budget, which is kind of cool. They probably should have slashed it more, would have been more cool. But ATF was capable of being bullied, right? And so that bullying helped in this particular instance. And then the other thing that they point to is there had been a guy who was head of the NFA division, and they had appointed this new guy, and this new guy went and sat through the process of actually completing these form.
He did 100 of them.
And he went through and saw what here is actually bullshit, because most of the information on the forums is unnecessary, doesn't need to be verified because it's verified elsewhere, or it's just in addition to being duplicative, it's just not actually something the ATF cares about.
Right.
This is speculation on my part, but I have a suspicion that they would at least try and call your local police department to see if you dropped off the duplicate forms, and they'd never get a call back, or the guy on the other end would go, huh? What? Nah, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Have a good day. Right. So I imagine there's a lot of paperwork that they were able to have cut out, right? Because it shouldn't be taking a year. And the other thing that they pointed to having changed is that when somebody's NICS, previously when somebody's NICS was delayed, that held up everybody who was in the queue of getting their suppressors run, their NFA transfers run behind them. So if one guy gets hung up, I guess that guy just spins in his desk chair for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks until the FBI gets back to him, and that everyone else is waiting at that point, which is hilarious and is only the sort of thing that could be dreamt up in a government, quote unquote, federal government bureaucratic efficiency. But that's gone now and fixed. And the end result of this is Form 4s are being processed in some cases in the same day, which is a lot better. Although it is still offensive that the Form 4 exists at all. Right. And frankly, if it's to exist, we're existing in the 21st century, right? You can 3D print a suppressor faster than you can buy one, even with the hours wait, right? If Form 4s are to exist in the digital age, it's utterly unacceptable that it's not as fast as a NICS check, right? It should actually just be a $200, you've sent it to them. The ACH will show that hitting leaving your account and hitting theirs immediately. They do a NICS check on you. I guess run your fingerprints. You can fax your fingerprints in or email your fingerprints in, although that's also a ridiculous requirement that doesn't actually help anything ever and should probably be dropped. But I completely just sidetracked myself.
So why is this article only talking about suppressors as if nothing else goes through on Form 4? Is it just because they're suppressors how many people are buying Form 4 SBRs? None. Right.
Meanwhile, Form 1, Form 1 versus Form 4 SBRs doesn't necessarily make sense to do at Form 4 because it's just added nonsense. Form 1 versus Form 4 cans, there's a marked difference in quality.
Right, of course. So I guess actually, no, this isn't just about suppressors. It's just about the Form 4 process.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. And I actually think it's kind of cool that somebody did this is what bureaucrats are supposed to do. Right. So what was this guy's name? The one who did 100 Form 4s?
Hiller, maybe?
Yeah. Ben Hiller. That's a good bureaucrat. That's a really good bureaucrat.
He wants to be a really good bureaucrat. Hey, he's got to be a listener. So once you go into work the next day, after whatever day this airs on, find a guy who you don't like, right? A guy who you've had beef with. Tell him just any Form 1s for machine guns he gets, just approve them, just to see what happens. Just approve 50 of them, 100 of them. Just start approving them. Just approve a bunch of new machine guns. because who cares, right? Just to see what would happen.
They're registered. You know where they are.
Maybe a funny thing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. But he determined 80% of the work they were doing didn't need to be done. That is like, that's great. Like that's the type of stuff you want to see. And, it's disgusting that this is happening at all, of course, but hey, an improvement in our life is an improvement. Speaking of another way to improve your life, you can visit MAF Corporation, guys. It's MAF-arms.com, and we've got promotional code FUDBusters. You can go on MAF-arms.com and check out all of the various stuff we've got for sale. And there is a series of competing codes. I am not going to overly pump mine, but if you look on Twitter, some of the other boys, there's a war. There's a war happening over who will drive the most customers to the fine Floridian chime vendors. So guys, check out some of the new stuff we've got on sale at MAF-arms.com. Use promotional code FUDBusters or the code for whoever else you like in the space. And we will have a war. The winner of the war, by the way, last time was RK Spookware. RK Spookware won the war last month. So this is interesting. Yeah, the FBI has released new statistic pack on active shooters, active shooter report for 2023. And if you have read the Gun Violence Archive, which is cited to almost exclusively by the anti-gun folk, you would expect that this would have several hundred incidents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the FBI came out with?
Of course, I've read the report already. It's I'm going to guess it's like a 42 or 48 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's 48. It's 48. Yeah. Yeah. It's the number, the definitions the Gun Violence Archive uses are absurd. The definition of the FBI isn't perfect, but it's less insane. The reality is the likelihood of this stuff happening to you is not high. And it's not something that you should be up at night worried about. It's not something that your kids should be scared of because it's not
orders of magnitude less dangerous than driving to work.
It's less dangerous than eating hard candy. So that's for perspective. We do live in a world where dangers exist, and that's a simple reality. Like horrible things happen, but they're not likely to happen. Thank God. And life is only getting better every day. Well, in some ways, but moving on. This is an interesting one.
I guess there was back on the report real quick. There was two interesting tidbits I noted. The FBI broke down by firearm type. 70% of these mass Las Vegases were handguns.
Couldn't be.
And the other interesting note is, they usually keep track of citizen involved Las Vegases, and in this particular past year, there was 4 instances of civilians getting involved, 2 of which ended in a fatality to the shooter. And
so that's like almost 10%,
right?
So that never happens.
No, one of those was the mall, Elijah Dickin. One of them had to have been,
right?
And so, I guess I can't remember off the top of my head the other one. That one's the one that got ingrained in the the online gun community's conscious, their psyche. It's just a part of their soul at this point. Was him shooting a Glock 40 yards, but that's sort of an interesting takeaway, right? Is it's hovering there around 10 in certain years past. I don't know if this is like a feel good statistic, because it is. This sort of thing is only possible if somebody's doing a heinous thing in the first place. Right. But in some years past, I know it had been as high as 25%, and you're certainly dealing with a law of small numbers sort of thing. Right. But it certainly does go to show, right? Anti-gunners like to point to this sort of thing as it literally never happens when there's good data that the FBI.
You're saying they like to point to a good guy with a gun situation as something that literally
never happens. It's just when completely fake and made up.
It actually is in the small numbers universe, it's actually significant. What is not significant is the 2% of incidents occurring with a shotgun.
Yes.
One incident. So yeah, it's fascinating. I also like how the Gun Violence Archiving incorporates defensive gun uses into their statistics as well.
Yes.
Just because their definitions are so incredibly outlandish. But moving on now to discuss another notable Vegas, the Uvalde police. Of course, there was a lot of news about them being investigated. And we have the former chief indicted, first ever criminal charges over failed response to 2022 mass Vegas event. And that is quite a profile. Mugshot for former Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo. God, that's quite a fall. But yeah, so the charges are basically felony endangerment, which is kind of interesting.
I don't know if that sticks, but okay.
Yeah. Faces 10 felony charges of child endangerment for failing to recognize the incident as an active shooting and for failing to take proper action to intervene. And these behaviors placed each child in imminent danger of bodily injury, death, physical impairment, and mental impairment. And then the other guy, charges of abandoning and endangering a child. So these are right, like this. Criminal law isn't designed to capture this behavior. Yep. I think is what I'm going to say.
You're kind of torturing it to make it apply here, and then you've also got to answer the qualified immunity question, which is probably going to be difficult to answer because I don't know that they did anything uniquely insane here. They did the regular, regular inclination.
We don't need to do anything for you.
Right. The regular inclination of cops. And in fact, I think qualified immunity, if not was born out of, was probably most fleshed out, at least in front of the Supreme Court, in the form of they have no responsibility to help you.
Right. So I think this probably happened because people wouldn't let it go, which is not a good reason to do something like this. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We got one more story, guys. But I will say you should go to patriotpatch.co. They're a longtime supporter of the show. And look what I got. It's look, United States bird.
That's the 4th of Eagles July.
Eagles got the twin rocket launch. This is a fine patch available for sale.
Do you think if you strap 2 rockets to a bald eagle, it'd fly really good? If
you do it on the 4th of July, is it still like, do
you still get a big illegal? Jail? Yeah.
Treason is the reason for the season. That's an interesting patch. That's the next Patch of the Month Club, guys. If you join the Patch of the Month Club, you get a delivery every month. That's where this came from. You never know it's going to come, so it's always kind of fun to see. Don't understand why the guitar is there, but hell, who cares? It's cool, and it is a reasonable price to be involved in something that will give you a little endorphin rush and just a little mood boost every month. So guys, go to patriotpatch.co, shop around, see what's available, and use promotional code TWIG10, that's TWIG10, to get a discount on your order. Thank you to patriotpatch.co for being our longest time supporter of the show. Last up, can you believe we can't even take a gun on an airplane anymore?
What the hell?
What's the point of this country? So yeah, the Representative Victoria Spartz was charged with weapons violation at the Dulles Airport. Look at how sad she looks. A spokesperson for the Indiana Republican said she accidentally carried an empty handgun in her suitcase with no magazine or bullets.
And that's a very important fact because the TSA's definition of a loaded firearm means includes that if you have a gun but no magazine and no bullet, it's not a loaded firearm.
Right.
And so you get your PP slapped really hard if you have a loaded gun that you try to take past the checkpoint. If you just have a gun or just ammunition or just a magazine, usually you don't get in any trouble, federally speaking.
Yeah.
Which is
a state
what's different in
misdemeanor.
this case, right?
Yeah.
In this case, she's being harassed with state law.
Yeah. Which is very common. It's actually very common. And it's actually a big money-making thing, especially in New York, where they harass you as you're, if you accidentally forget that you got something you're going through.
And so what had happened was, in that case, is she was going to Europe or something, some awful European place for whatever reason, and had somehow managed to forget that she had a gun with no magazine and no ammo and the end of one of her bags she was carrying. I assume this is maybe a result of she repurposed her range bag maybe to be a travel bag. Maybe I don't know how you just stick your firearm in your bag and let's go, but
I've done that.
Certainly a little bit of an oversight. Seems like she isn't likely to get in much trouble over it, but I think is a good example of there's so many bullshit laws surrounding guns that really needn't exist at this point.
And it's just a collection of rakes spread out all over the place that if you're going to own and carry guns, you just be cautious of the rakes. You could step on one at any point.
Yes.
With no warning. And
it'll hurt badly. And then we're going to get mad at you over the fact that you're in pain.
Right. Yeah. Why are you hurting? You shouldn't have borked the law. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we'll see you next time.
Podcast has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. For more, visit firearmsradio.net.